for cycling infrastructure, is talking about roundabouts. Now, as I mentioned in the previous module, this is been separated deliberately from the intersections because it is its own standalone study point with its own kind of considerations and risks. So there's lots to talk about here and lots to think about, because generally we're not too good at designing for cyclist safety within roundabouts. See the question there about Wally making an appearance. That is a good reminder. No, there's no Wally today because there's no quiz at the end of today's module. Instead, we have an assignment. So no Wally. Thank you for that reminder. Hopefully everyone had the chance to review last module's 360-degree footage. So traveling through a protected intersection turning right versus just a conventional intersection turning right and using a little hook turn there. Interested to hear if anyone had any any experiences or any perceptions of safety in either of those examples. Today's agenda, we're going to, as mentioned, discuss solely on roundabouts. A lot of the guidance is taken from a Victorian document, as well as an international one from the Department of Transport, Massachusetts, so in the States. This is a really good document that is provided on our LMS, and I'd recommend downloading that. And also there's another standalone Austroads report, which is solely focused on bicycle safety at roundabouts, which I think speaks volumes of just how important of an issue this is. Like if Austroads produces one report to discuss one topic, it's probably going to be a pretty significant, topic, because they've decided to invest all this money to work out what's best to do in this space. So another really useful report that is worth looking through. In terms of the agenda,
sorry, a question came in on the agenda, so you can expand on this as you run through it. Will we be discussing slip lanes or roundabout approaches?
Yes, we will be discussing roundabout approaches. The slip lanes was more covered in the intersections where we had what's generally applied is just an on-road facility, and then some conflict paint where the vehicle crosses over the bicycle lane. That's generally how those slip lanes are managed. Yeah.
There are slip lanes at roundabouts, so I'm not sure if that's exactly what was referred to, but yeah, we don't really cover that sort of very non-common way to set up a roundabout. And I was going to mention, in addition to those guides, there are some pretty good TMR guidance as well, which Michael's nicely started to share. And there's sort of 4 relevant documents to a degree. But anyway, I'm sure they'll come out as we go. Thank you.
Fabulous. So we'll discuss protected roundabouts. So previously we had protected intersections. There's another term with protected roundabouts, similar design philosophy about maximizing sight lines, but looks a little bit different to how we approach the protected intersection. So we'll go through examples of that. A couple of international examples similar to how we ran the previous module, and we'll have a look at Melbourne's protected roundabout as well. We'll also have a chat about multi-lane roundabouts and how to manage cyclist safety within that space. It's a pretty stressful environment to cycle through when there's multiple lanes, particularly within the circulating area and turning right. So discussing exactly how that can be managed. And then we'll also hop into more local roundabouts, just one lane of traffic each way and slow environments. And those are the types where you can actually just get a cyclist kind of riding straight in the middle of the circulating area and being most, right in their sight lines for other motorists. So it's obvious that they're within the traffic lane and traveling through that roundabout. Okay, first we'll have a look at what a protected roundabout looks like. So here's just a sneak peek. We will go through all the design features later on, but this is obviously just an artist impression of the Melbourne protected roundabout. And what you can see straight away is bicycle paths are being led off-road. So cyclists aren't forced to enter the circulating carriageway. So they're not forced to ride here. Instead, they're headed off-road. They cross with priority. It's not always the case that that occurs, but in this instance, it is. And what I mean by priority is cyclists aren't forced to stop and give way to motorists that cross over there. Instead, cyclists have the right of way, so they can cross, and motorists are forced to slow down and give way. They can cross over there and then continue their journey wherever they happen to be going and perform all their turning movements without accessing the circulating area of the roundabout. So it's a pretty novel concept, and it's pretty exciting as a cyclist because you don't have to be within that really restricted zone where things like sightlines are an issue. And I think this next figure actually illustrates the point of sightline issues within roundabouts, particularly where you have multiple stand-up lanes on approach. And Ken, we actually might launch a poll here. So we'll get the participants thinking about exactly which cyclist do you think is most at risk within this figure. So
now,
sorry, Ken.
I was just going to remind people you can move the poll box around your screen. Just pick it up and drag it if it's right in your way there, so you can see what Max is talking to. Sorry, Max. Go.
A, B, and C. Just in case you can't see that little lettering there. But which cyclist do you think is most at risk? So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer that one.
And car colours we've got there: red, yellow, purple, blue,
Red.
and orange.
Yes, very good. It's good to note.
People are thinking, what is Ken on about? We had some debate one course about some of the colours of those cars. I don't know whether people's screens are different or
maybe I should label the cars with numbers as well.
Oh, that would, yeah. the old classic C3 crash.
I'll still get it wrong though.
All right. Well, we're getting lots of good answers have come in, and that's everybody. I'm going to end that poll. I'll share the results. Oh, okay, we've got a little bit of a spread here. A, B, and then drops down to C. What be your thoughts there, Bill?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting to see that spread of results, because I think it really illustrates that all cyclists are at risk within this arrangement. So I agree with A, B, and C being the answer. So well done to everyone. So A could be at risk in this instance, in that the yellow vehicle is focused on, oncoming traffic, basically. If they start to see purple heading out, they're pretty likely just to head out themselves as well, which means not being able to see that cyclist or not paying attention to a cyclist there. So there's a potential collision in that aspect. Cyclist B is, as you can see, these little triangles are kind of the sight lines, or where the driver is paying attention. The purple driver is focused on vehicles within the circulating area. So it's likely they would see C, but it could be at their peripheral. B is in a very unfortunate position because they're not within those sight triangles. And the purple car has actually already started to head out into the roundabout. So it's very likely that B is going to be running into the purple vehicle, assuming that they are in motion. And similarly with cyclist C there, it's just that same situation where, as motorists, we've grown up with this idea when we approach an intersection or a roundabout, we are actually looking for cars. That's just what we're trained to do. So we look for that big, wide metal body. And so cyclists and motorcyclists is something that we need to train into our head. We actually need to cognitively think, are there cyclists there as well? It's not as obvious. It's much more part of our DNA to look for the bigger vehicle, because that's generally what we're concerned about. So yeah, there is some psychological research. If you are interested, we can share some research papers, and there's like documentaries about this idea of looking but not seeing. It's a really interesting topic, because you think that, you know, the cyclists are using that space just as equally as vehicles, but it's very, very common for vehicles just to not perceive that they're actually there. They can just focus on the vehicle and not much more narrow road users. So that's why C can also be at risk, even though they are within those sight lines. All right. While we're talking about roundabout safety, we'll just go through where crashes tend to occur within roundabouts. So an entering motorist versus circulating cyclist. So that was what we saw in the previous slide, is the most common. And that's where that failed to see kind of phenomena occurs, where a motor vehicle will assume that the carriageway is free because there's no vehicles, and maybe didn't see or didn't perceive that there was a cyclist there, resulting in this crash type. So that's 68%. Just go to the next one along. Cyclists crossing as pedestrians. So that's a little bit further away from the roundabout, and perhaps that, you know, we would be at higher speeds than pedestrians, and just lack of clarity who gives way to who, or turning motorists just not expecting a cyclist to be there. It makes up about 8% of conflicts occurring within this space. This one always catches me by surprise. Exiting motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. For those who have ever actually ridden within a roundabout, particularly multi-lane roundabouts, that's certainly where I feel most at risk. I'm very, very worried if I'm a cyclist on the outside lane here, and a vehicle who just wants to exit there kind of cuts in front of me, because they may assume that I'm getting off at that leg as well and not heading across them. To me, it's a very, very uneasy feeling, and I would certainly try to avoid roundabouts that have that as a feature. So I'm really surprised to see that that has been represented as just 9% of conflicts. So maybe it's just my own perception of safety versus exactly what's kind of being represented here. But anyway, it's certainly still an issue. And the final one is sideswipe within a roundabout. So that could be vehicles changing lanes and just, once again, failing to see cyclists that would already be within that space. But yeah, certainly the most standout in that crash type is that entering motor vehicles versus circulating cyclists. We'll hop into protected roundabouts. And for those who haven't heard the term, perhaps something like this springs to mind. This is the Hovenring in Netherlands, which involves grade separation. This is a wonderful thing, but this is not considered a protected roundabout. This is much more impressive. So what's actually happening here is cyclists are redirected by grade separation, and they can just use this feature to travel in whichever quadrant of this intersection, and they don't need to interact with any of that massive carriageway below. So all the heavy vehicles and general traffic, they're down below, and cyclists get to ride up above them. So that's in the Netherlands for those that haven't seen that one. It's a wonderful example, but it's not a protected roundabout. Ken?
There's a question, interesting question came in around do cyclists actively avoid roundabouts because of their crash risk or their just dislike of them, I suppose?
Yes.
Any evidence around that, or just is it?
Yeah, I'm sure there would be evidence. I can't really quote any figures at the top of my head, but just anecdotally, like friends that cycle, even our colleague Ilsa, who's online, I know that Ilsa likes to stay onto shared paths and would probably like to avoid these situations where there are multi-lane roundabouts. So feel free to correct me, Ilsa. Maybe I'm talking on your behalf, but there's certainly a portion of cyclists that just wouldn't feel comfortable at all cycling within those roundabout areas. Yep.
Thank you.
That's all good. So we'll have a look at exactly what a protected roundabout is. it's got this kind of design where, as we saw in the artistic impression, we're wanting to bring cyclists away from the circulating area. So providing a kind of off-road bicycle network or connection around the roundabout, so not within the circulating area. And then ideally giving them priority and crossing them over to continue their journey across the roundabout. So I'll go into another design which might make things a little bit clearer exactly how things are working. So item number 1, we've got our bicycle crossing, which as you can see is in this space here. And once again, back to that principle with the shared path, with the protected intersection, whenever you've got high volumes of pedestrians and cyclists, it's very good practice to separate the two users. So you can see there's a pedestrian crossing and a cyclist crossing is adjacent there. There's these yield lines, what we would call give way line marking, to let vehicles know that cyclists cross within this space with priority. You can also see the yield lines where the cyclists are crossing the pedestrian crossing, going back to that idea, well, let's provide pedestrians priority across the entire roundabout, similar to what we saw at the protected intersections. Number 3 here is bicycle stop lines. This one's a little bit confusing because this is actually saying cyclists need to stop and give way, but also general traffic need to stop and give way. So that's not one that we would probably recommend. If you're assigning priority to cyclists, you wouldn't need to worry about putting that feature there. I think that's been installed there as like an either or. So either there's the yield lines for the motorists or there's the stop line for the cyclists. So you've got to pick your priority and work out, which road user is giving way to who. Item number 4 there, just the curb radius. This feature here is a bit too technical, don't really need to not worry about that. This channelizing island, once again, not really an essential feature of this design, but it's just showing to demarcate pedestrians versus cyclists. I'm actually probably not a big fan of putting a physical barrier in between the two users there because it's just going to create a tripping hazard. And, if one user needs to leave their designated space and get into the other, the cyclist lane or vice versa, yeah, I just think that's a little bit of an unnecessary hazard that's added there. And number 6 is bicycle pedestrian warning sign. Once again, not the type of signage we would use within our jurisdictions, but yes, it's similar kind of idea what we'll do. And just getting a question there, what is the source document for this diagram? I'll check if I put it in here. Yeah, so it's the DOT separated bike lane planning and design guide, and that will be saved on our LMS under the resources tab. So you can have a flick through that. Let's just hop into some examples. It's a lot clearer once you can actually see how these things are working within, within the real world, basically. So this one is in Assen in the Netherlands, of course, for those that can tell by the color of the paths and maybe even these backward names. I have flipped this image so drivers are on the left-hand side of the road just to make things a bit easier for us to perceive for the purpose of this exercise. First thing that you may have noticed is this is an enormous footprint, and that is true. There's lots and lots of roundabouts where you just simply would not be able to provide that much space without, tearing down buildings or significant property acquisition. So appreciate this would be, more appropriate at a greenfield site, but it's a really good example of showing exactly how these protected roundabouts work. So we'll just have a flick through. A cyclist traveling from the top of the screen and heading kind of down to the bottom. They've given this off-road facility. So as I talked about, we're not bringing cyclists within the circulating area. We're getting them to cross away from the roundabout. And as you can see, there's actually a lot of room here for a motorist to be able to prop and wait and give way to cyclists. So that's one aspect of the protected roundabout, providing that offset from where the crossing point is to where the circulating area. In this case, there's actually quite a big distance. We've got other examples where it's much narrower, but the good thing about having this big distance is motorists, when they do prop and wait here, once again, their line of sights are excellent because cyclists will be crossing right in front of them. There is, this is a pretty tricky question, but I will see if anyone can think of a good solution within this space. Can anyone think of any risks that might be associated bringing this crossing point too far out? So what happens if cyclists cross down here instead? Any suggestions? So we can look at it being really, really close to the circulating area, or at the other extreme, what happens if we bring it really far away from the circulating area? Is there any risks associated with that?
So while people pop some ideas in there, a general question has come in from Michael around, is it true that roundabouts are safer for vehicles and signalised intersections, but signalised intersections are safer for cyclists than roundabouts?
Yes, I would agree with that statement. I think generally roundabouts perform incredibly well for general traffic and not so for cyclists. So,
I would, in general, I agree. I think that the framing of that question is not taking into account where we're moving to in that signalised intersections we can think of with speed calming treatments like raised platforms, raised intersections, signalisation. Roundabouts we can think of with this sort of stuff. We can think of signalised roundabouts. We can think of, so we're much more evolved than simply, where we were 20 years ago, which was one or the other, like, and no modifications on it. Like, that's it. So, and the context on each one. Is it a low speed signalised intersection, or, it's going to be good for cars? Anyway, but I mean, it's fascinating. I won't go into it.
That's a fair caveat. You'd have to really look at that specific situation. Like if you're talking multi-lane, high speed, signalised intersection, or a local roundabout, well, I'd be choosing the local roundabout to cycle through every day of the week. So it certainly is dependent on exactly how those road environments are operating.
So we've seen vehicle speed increases in that distance, desire lines. In fact, and some cyclists would prefer just to use the more direct route and put themselves in more harm's way potentially there. So any of those take your fancy for a prize?
I think all of them are bang on. I agree with all of them, but yeah, the one answer I was looking for there was the speed. That now motorists, as they're coming around this bend, they're generally at a lower speed. As soon as you push it further and further out, they've got ability to pick up speed, and that makes them less likely then to have to slow down again to give way to cyclists or pedestrians crossing there. So yeah, I agree with that.
Certainly, though, the desire line, interesting one. Pedestrians in particular, just
all very relevant.
If you're sending them 100 meters out of their way.
I'll show you how this one actually looks out on the ground. Once again, this one's a little bit confusing in terms of priority. So because of the zebra crossing, that to me automatically communicates that, there's pedestrian priority. But if you were exiting here, doesn't look like there's any give way signs or anything to alert motorists that cyclists are crossing there as well, and cyclists need to be have priority. So there's some degree of confusion there, but once again, this is the Netherlands, where they probably don't have the same issues that we face of not really expecting cyclists to be at these locations. So just something to keep in mind. I've got another example. of a protected roundabout, but this one, as you can see, is much more compact. And by compact, I mean there's just that there's less space that the overall project has taken up. Because we've got our bicycle lane, it's basically just, it is within the circulating area, but it's actually separated by these little concrete separator strips. A little bit difficult to see on this image, but there are little islands that separate general traffic. You're within this inner ring, and cyclists, you're within this outside circle. This one's also in the Netherlands. This is outside Rotterdam. This one has a few quirks. So the previous one we saw, there was space for a motorist to be able to leave the roundabout, and then they can prop and wait in order to give way to cyclists or pedestrians that are crossing. It's not really the same within this example. So luckily that white car is doing a perfect job of demonstrating what I would like to explain. And you can also see that there looks to be a cyclist already within this roundabout. But if they were going in this direction and this motorist, maybe it was just a second later, let's just say, so the cyclist was a little bit closer, say at that point. It's a little bit it is difficult, sorry, for this motorist to be able to look behind them and see a cyclist at that point in time, because we haven't provided that offset from where the crossing point is to where the circulating area is. So before we saw a bigger offset where a motorist can leave the roundabout and then they approach the crossing point. This, it's all kind of amalgamated into one space almost. So you don't have that same benefit of maximizing your sight lines. For those that can't quite comprehend what I mean by that, I've got this little demonstration. So let's just pretend there's a nice Porsche driver that wants to exit this leg here of the roundabout. And our cyclist coming along here wants to carry on through. If you put yourself in the perspective of that Porsche driver, I'm not sure why I chose a Porsche. I've got nothing against Porsche drivers, but so apologies. But if you put yourself in that perspective of the driver of that vehicle, it would be very difficult to be able to see this cyclist. And as a cyclist, you always want the clarity of, yes, I'm visible. Yes, I can be seen by general traffic, because as we looked at the start, this is one of the leading crash types within these roundabouts, where motorists are leaving the roundabout as cyclists are crossing over. So this one hasn't got necessarily the same benefit as the one that we saw in the first example, where there was a greater offset from our circulating area to our crossing point. In saying that, I still like it as a concept. I think it's pretty cool that cyclists stay slightly in this example. They have a more direct route. I will just hop back into the previous slide and just get rid of some of these scribbles. But if we had brought cyclists, say, off-road and then crossing here, and then assuming that we can take all this land and stuff like that, you can see this distance has been added kind of on both sides, which, you know, it could be 10, 15 meters, and you times that by 2. So 20, 30 meters, you know, it's not massive amounts of extra length. However, as a cyclist, even those small little detours can be a bit of a grievance, a little bit annoying. Cyclists may choose not to use this as a roundabout because that's just a bit of a detour that they don't want to do. So this option does provide a more direct connection, while still offering a protected roundabout solution where there is actual separation between motorists within the circulating area and the bicycle lane. So yeah, I wanted to use this as an example that it does have disadvantages, that it's not maximizing the sight lines for exiting vehicles, but it's also a bit more direct for cyclists. So I didn't want to negate it as a possible design choice if you were operating in this space. Got one more example from an international. This one is in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, UK. So opened somewhat recently, in a couple of years ago, July 2020. And you can see it's a little bit of a combination from the first example that we saw and the second. So you can certainly see that it's got this one outer ring, which is for cyclists, which is what our second example had. But it is providing somewhat of an offset from the circulating area to where cyclists cross. And that is applicable at all of the exiting legs. So it's kind of taken little design influences from both of those examples, and it's using best of both worlds. So you've got a little bit of, you're improving your sightline opportunities as vehicles are exiting, but you're also getting that directness for cyclists that just want to get from A to B as quickly and as most direct way possible. So, Ken.
And the right turn on this for a cyclist, do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, sure. So we'll pretend that we're at the left of the screen here and we're riding along. If we wanted to take the right turn, this is a one-way facility, which means we do need to take quite a circuitous route. It's not as easy as a pedestrian. But say I wanted to do a right turn. Oh, this is actually more like a U-turn almost. There we go. And then I'm down at that leg there. So it is quite a sweeping turn, route to take. There are bidirectional protected roundabouts as well. So you could investigate, making this a bidirectional bicycle lane. So a right turn could just be like this. But that's not what's installed at this. We do have an example of one of those though coming up. So you can have a look at that. Anything else, Ken?
Michael's just sort of pondering the conflict points that creates. I suppose I'm now pondering the conflict points that you would go through if you were just trying to navigate that through the circulating carriageway with other traffic as a cyclist, and you're probably getting the same number of conflict points, slightly different maybe, but okay.
I think also this image makes it look like this is huge. I think maybe we'll hop down onto ground level. So we'll have a look at the next figure, which might, rationalize exactly the distance that would be required for cyclists to cross here. But yeah, few points to note though. So as I said, this one is an example where we've provided a little prop area or an offset there. So we've got space for motorists to leave the roundabout. I think this clearly demonstrates this driver here being able to sight cyclists because they're right in front of them. It's a lot easier than that Porsche example that I showed before, where it's at the back left of their vehicle. So much better for that aspect. But I might give out a prize here. If anyone can think of what's something else that could potentially happen by providing, if it's too close to the circulating area, that crossing point. So before we said if we push the crossing point too far away, then we're going to get higher travel speeds. If we push the crossing point too close to the roundabout, any suggestions or any risks that might be associated with that type of design? And I'll give you a little bit of a clue. It is happening right at this instant in time in this photo.
So as people pop some ideas in there, question around, e-bike speeds, making it more difficult to design for bike versus car conflicts, I suppose, not just here, but out there overall.
Okay. It's a concern and, it is a risk, but I don't think there's a simple solution within that space. We're certainly not looking at making e-bikes less available or trying to deter people from using that as a form of transport. So we just need to think of, well, how can we actually manage cyclist speeds and vehicle speeds at those conflict points.
Yeah.
It's probably the best principle-based approach you could go for.
Yep. Okay, we've got some answers coming in. Rear end crash risk could cause issues with the build-up of cars, block vehicle movements within the roundabout, vehicles entering the roundabout blocking cyclists and queuing. So queuing up is a thing. Any of those particularly want to give prizes? Again, all good answers.
All good answers. But yeah, the one I was thinking of is this queuing effect that you've now created, because, you know, you could imagine if this was very busy and lots of cyclists coming through or lots of pedestrians crossing, and this vehicle kind of holding up the rest of the movement of the entire roundabout potentially. So potentially that whole roundabout becoming quite congested. And for those that find that situation stressful, or it's, you know, not going to be, we couldn't possibly build a project that would do that. Once again, I just reiterate that this is a project that has been developed for cyclist safety, to get cyclists away from motor vehicles and to improve their level of safety approaching roundabouts. And so if that's the objective of the project, then they're a big tick in my book. And even if it is a slight increase to rear end crashes, they are generally very, very minor crash types. Whereas a cyclist getting hit by a car within a roundabout is likely a very, very serious crash type. So you've kind of got to weigh up the, you know, what is this project trying to achieve? What's the objectives? If it is for cyclist safety, then that more or less could come at the cost of things like congestion, and yeah, it's no longer being considered a general traffic priority route, is what I would suggest. Any thoughts there on that, Cam? Am I being too bold?
No, I think it's great, and I gave everybody a prize who answered there to show how easy it is to win a prize if you just type some thoughts in, get some others to type some things in there. Rosie's made a comment there. You could say there is a risk for pedestrian priority that already exists at most roundabouts anyway, right? The risk associated with giving pedestrian priority. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I mean, yeah, pedestrians at roundabouts is a funny thing to analyze in detail as well. The one comprehensive crash study I've seen and looked into shows some really good advantages to roundabouts for pedestrian safety without pedestrian facilities, but I don't think that they accounted for exposure in a proper meaningful way.
Okay.
Because it was just a bit odd, and we know that it's a real impediment to people walking, trying to cross roundabouts. So yeah, I don't think it was. Yeah. Anyway, let's keep going, Max. We got lots to cover.
Yes. Let's have a look at an actual video of one working in the real world. So I'm just going to click play on this. You can have a focus on how cyclists are using this facility, this protected roundabout. This is an example similar to the one that we just showed in Cambridge, where you've got the circular area where cyclists are able to ride. But there is still that little bit of a storage area for for road general traffic to prop before crossing over. So you can see there's heavy vehicles there, there's a bus there. For those that also may have noticed, on the right-hand side of this particular roundabout, it's a bi-directional facility. So the left-hand side is one way, but the right-hand side is bi-directional. So that could alleviate that concern that was discussed before of not being the most direct way. Well, if you're able to provide bi-directional, if you've got the space there, then it could also be seen as a solution here. But it's quite a good video that just demonstrates how this kind of works.
It's interesting with the bus. If the bus, when it goes, if a car had sort of stopped it would have been propped over, and that you're talking about having then that pack of cyclists comes through. Having islands there would have made it hard for them to go around, wouldn't it?
That's exactly right. Yes. So if you had have had this, oh, my pen's gone again. If you had had a physical separator in between the pedestrian crossing and cyclists there, then yeah, if a cyclist needs to weave around a car, you've just kind of given this tunnel that they can't escape then. So
that's right. Yeah.
That's why I said it's not necessarily a required feature.
The bikes seem to have priority over the peds, but they all just get along. But like Europeans, as Toby says there. Do the bikes? Yeah, they try to work out. They do have priority over the peds there, don't they? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So that's sort of different to how we have done this in Victoria.
It is, yes.
But it is all friendly, isn't it?
So we would have a zebra crossing there just to extend that pedestrian priority all the way across the bike lane as well. But that's not done in this instance. So really good pickup there, Toby. Was that Toby?
It was Toby. And Michael sort of making this point generally about low speeds at roundabouts and probably connecting to that comment around the pedestrians and for motorcyclists as well. And that, these users, they're good traffic calming technique around about, so it does slow people down. And then so that's advantageous all around. It's just that sort of additional challenges created for some of our most vulnerable road users, isn't it? Good stuff. Let's keep going.
I just love this as an example. Like, I would love to see this being installed, across corridors. It's just, this is such a better way of treating roundabouts than what we do currently, which is bit of a free-for-all. Anyway, let's have a look at Melbourne's protected intersection. So this is what things were like beforehand. Very, very common arrangements where you might just have bicycle lanes that are on the periphery or on the outside of the circulating area with no separation there. So basically just pushing cyclists to the edge of the roundabout and saying that's where you've got to ride if you want to enter this roundabout. Makes right turning incredibly difficult and stressful. So that's the before case. And this is what looked like afterwards, after a protected roundabout was installed. And a few things to note. We've got an octagon shape, which may look a little bit odd. Just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, octagon, just making sure. And one of the peculiar features of this is because you've got these angles like this, any kind of angle like that is not particularly comfortable for cyclists. Cyclists, just like motorbikes, they like to have a more sweeping bend. It's just a easier way to ride. So providing that little bit of an angle is not all that desirable, but that's probably, a very minor disadvantage of this particular intersection. It is really a wonderful, sorry, I should have said roundabout. It is a wonderful treatment. Here's a close-up image of how things work. So I'll show you, if we're heading from the bottom of the screen as a cyclist, how right turn would be managed. So heading along here, we get to go off-road. We get to cross with priority. We just follow along this octagon shape until we get to our leg that we want to exit and then continue our journey. Really cool thing about this protected roundabout, which wasn't shown in the other ones, is all of these legs have been raised. And as we've said multiple times now, if you've got vulnerable road users crossing, pedestrians, cyclists, people in wheelchairs, if you can raise that crossing point, it just offers an incredible safety advantage for those vulnerable road users. Raising the crossing point forces a motorist to slow down. So if they happen to not see the give way sign, or they don't notice the zebra markings, or they're distracted or whatever, having that raised feature will physically slow down that vehicle. So if there was a collision, it's going to be at lower speeds, which will be You know, we know that speeds are so inextricably linked to trauma, and even little reductions in speed have a massive difference in the likelihood of someone being seriously injured or just an other type of injury. So any of those, that's what I really like about this particular roundabout is it's raised up all those legs and said, yep, we're giving priority, but we're also considering that motorists may not understand exactly what's happening here. So we're going to physically force them to slow down at the conflict point. It's just very, very good, safe system thinking. I'll open up to the group again, and I will just briefly ask if anyone can think of any disadvantages with this particular design, or this arrangement, I should say, the layout of this roundabout. So I already touched on the little awkward kind of angles, but can anyone think of any other design issues that you may have noted from this particular roundabout? And I'll give you a clue. It's relating to right turns for cyclists.
Okay, well, while people possibly put some ideas in there, Toby's asking around the effectiveness of the raising occurring immediately at the crossing point, or should it be earlier on the advance to that?
Yep, pretty valid question. So it's similar to what we were looking at with the other protected roundabouts, but if we bring it back too far, then there's the risk that an exiting motorist will speed up, and you know there's that risk there of just not expecting to see that raised crossing point at that location. But the fact that it is raised kind of reduces that likelihood altogether. So I think that's, you know, a big positive. These ones in particular, it's somewhat, it looks as if a vehicle that pauses, that gives way at the circulating area, they actually may still be on the ramp itself. So if it could have been brought back just a little bit to provide a propped vehicle to be clear of the crossing point, that would probably be more ideal. But yeah, it's just that trying to find that sweet spot of not being too close, not trying to be too far away, and trying to manage exactly where that should be at these designs. But there's plenty of examples of that offset working at a variety of distances, and I don't think we've got clear guidance just yet to say that, you know, 6 meters, that's the one that we need, that's always going to work. So it's still a little bit of just, you know, having a look at what the road environment is like and what can actually be catered for.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because there is conflicting not conflicting guidance out there, but there's a variety of things. Victoria talks about 5 meters, PMR talks about 6 to 8 meters, or possibly up to 20 meters. And so we're getting definitely a range that's in there for the context and scenario you're in. You can also do 0 meters. You can also just say, no, up here, right up there. But anyway, I think Toby was also possibly sort of questioning how you reduce the speed of the vehicle on the approach. So, you know, I think one of the key points is that a raised crossing point is not like people slow down on the approach to the raised area. They see it, they slow down. So it's not like the raised bit itself does the slowing, if that makes sense. So you don't need to do advanced slowing techniques ahead of the crossing point when your crossing point is on an elevated thing. You also get that extra advantage of some sort of sight, you know, eye height, sight up higher, advantages through. But anyway, we've got lots of different comments coming in here. I'm not sure where I'm going to start. I'm quite a little lost. I forgot exactly what we were talking about. Transition on the approach and departure on the on-road bike lanes. Long distance to turn right. Offset between existing cars and bikes. curbside parking risks, having to go all the way around, not bi-directional, bike very close to cars, a decision point, hard to know if bikes are turning right or going straight through, heavy vehicle swept paths, do pavement markings do the slowing? Lots there.
Lots to think about. The one that certainly rung my bells, because I did mention I was interested in the right turns, was that providing this particular, preferred route for cyclists and making them go in this fashion to perform a right turn. It is more circuitous and it is more of a detour. So cyclists may want to just enter the carriageway and do that. So that was the kind of the one that I was considering there, which is being undertaken exactly in this photo. So not using the protected feature of the roundabout, but instead just opting for the carriageway. Also not wearing a helmet, this particular gentleman, but I'm not against, similar to the intersections that I spoke about on Tuesday, I'm not against providing that as an option for cyclists. If cyclists want to ride on road and they feel comfortable, this is a low speed environment. It's 40 kilometers, generally just local traffic. We do use this as an example in our 360-degree video. So you'll hear more about this project and how it came about and the specific design detail of this project in that video. So I won't go into too much information now, but I actually like the idea of, let's not just force all cyclists to use this as a, use the protected feature, because they may not want to. They may find this transition from the carriageway up onto the footpath uncomfortable. They may not want to, be near pedestrians. They may just want to ride as this cyclist is doing right there. Ken.
Oh, Toby's asked an interesting question around the road rules associated with that, which I'm not sure on that one. But interestingly, also, if you have a Copenhagen lane that enters that roundabout, so you can see the parked car there on the left. If that car was shifted out and you had your bike facility as Copenhagen style, it encourages people, and you can kind of trap them to a degree of getting in there and on that path and utilizing it. So that connectivity, and I think do you show some results from the study we did on that?
I do.
That's good. Any comments on that road rule one?
Yeah, I was just going to expand on that. So there's a road rule which states that if there is a bicycle facility present, cyclists have to use it. So if there's a bike lane present, cyclists have to use that, not the carriageway. I would think, actually, I better not offer any legal advice. I think you probably need to chat to a legal expert to work out exactly what that means in this context, because there's so many examples where I can think, if it's safer for a cyclist to use the carriageway, then surely that would take, it just makes more sense that would take precedence over a road rule. But maybe a barrister could argue against that and say, no, that's what the road rule says. If you've got a bike lane and that's a protected bike intersection, you've got to use the footpath. You've got to use exactly where that green paint is. So yeah, I wish I could provide a more definitive response there, but I'm really not sure exactly how that would hold up in a law of court. I tend to stay away from those legal issues. But yeah, depends on who's representing you there, Michael. Or that Michael, sorry, no, Toby. This is what Ken was talking about just before as well. So on one of the approaches, they're not similar at all of the legs, but there is a Copenhagen lane treatment. And if it was your design intent for all cyclists to use the protected roundabout, well, you could just physically separate all the way up. So make cyclists force them to use that. On another leg here, you can see it's where there was parked vehicles. So there's a little bit of pavement marking there that says use bike lane at roundabout, and then a little bit of an arrow. And that's kind of where my theory of, is that really good enough to satisfy that road rule that that is a bicycle facility and cyclists are being told to use that, because a cyclist may not be able to read that. They may not read English. They may not be able to see that in low light conditions. So I just don't know how that could possibly hold up in court. And if a cyclist decides to go that way, is it really committing an offence? I'm open to suggestions there if anyone does know the answer to that. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. What Ken mentioned before as well is for cyclists actually using the protected feature of the bicycle lane, for cyclists heading through, so performing a straight movement there's about 91% of cyclists decided to use the protected feature. So we did an evaluation here and we did some counts and checked all the movements, and within our period of conducting this study, we had about 91% using the protected roundabout feature to travel through. And understandably, that decreased for cyclists wanting to turn right, but it only went down to about 77%. So let's just say 1 in 4 cyclists, if they were turning right, would rather use the carriageway because it's closer and easier and more direct for them. But still, the majority are using the protected facility. So you can take that as a win or a loss, or, you know, achieving project objectives or not. But I think it's quite interesting research to show that it's not 100% one way or the other. Okay, had a good chat about protected roundabouts. We'll now move into the space of multi-lane roundabouts, and I'll just get this banner out of the way so we can have a good look here. This one is in a high-speed environment. I think from memory, 100 kilometers per hour, could be 80. I'll double check there with Ken. Do you know this is just east of Traralgon there, Ken? Do you happen to know? Is this 100 up here?
No, it's an 80.
It's 80, yeah. Okay. Anyway, high-speed environment. Ideally, would have cyclists off-road, completely away from this roundabout, but this is currently how things are situated. We'll have a look. If you're on the right-hand side of the screen, we'll pretend we're cycling within this space here, and we want to turn. Well, we'll just pretend like we're going straight at the moment, just for ease. But first thing you may notice is this bike lane, it begins to taper. So it starts off reasonably wide, but by the time we actually get to the giveaway line marking, it's tapered significantly. So your actual width of your bike lane there is incredibly narrow. As you're cycling along in this space, there's a tiny little bit of bicycle line marking there. Also interesting to have that as green within that space, because the green is generally used to represent the conflict points, and that's not the conflict point, because you would more likely see the conflict at this location. Anyway, that's just a minor aside. And then cyclists are brought back and they can continue within this fashion. So that's just heading through. For cyclists that wanted to turn right, there's actually no ability to stop at this location and then cross over, because this is a curb, that's a curb, that's a sign there, there's another sign there. So there's no opportunity to cross and use this island as kind of a staged crossing. I would suggest that's how people would do it, but it's actually not being formalized. In other words, cyclists, if they wanted to turn right, would actually have to cross over and do this, creating these really awkward conflict points there, because motorists may not expect that to occur. And that's what I was saying before. That's where I feel most nervous entering at these multi-lane roundabouts, is not necessarily when I'm already in the roundabout and someone coming out, even though that is the majority crash type. It's performing this movement, crossing over live traffic lanes. Even if you've got your right hand up and you're pointing, I'm going that way, I'm not exiting this leg. Very stressful situation there. Have a look how this looks out on ground. That provides a bit of a clearer picture of that tapering bike lane that just really, really narrows. For those that may have noticed, there was a bit of a stop sign there, and it's not actually a signalized roundabout. that signal is for the boom gates that are operated on the side there. So there's a level rail crossing there, and that just operates in case vehicles back up too much. They don't then enter the intersection and have rear end crashes. So it's got nothing to do with cycle safety. It's just what I wanted to say there. But yeah, just wanted to show what this looks like on ground. You can see that really narrow bike lane, not a good scenario at all. So that one's in Victoria. This one here is in Canberra in the ACT, and they've decided for a different approach. It looks like a very, very similar roundabout, just the way that it's been configured. You've got multiple lanes for east-west leg, and then north-south, just single lanes, but very, very similar arrangement. But the way that they've managed cyclists crossing is much different. So once again, we'll focus from the right of the screen. We do have an on-road facility, and cyclists are forced to hop off. I shouldn't say forced, it's actually not forced, but they're being encouraged to hop off the road, take this off-road part and follow this along until they get to here, where there's a hold rail. So they're not being given priority here. They're saying you need to stop, give way, and make sure there's, there's a free carriageway for you to cross. You can cross over and continue your journey. And then if you were heading straight, you can head back onto the carriageway there or onto the on-road bicycle lane, or same situation, provide a hold rail, cross over here. You can then stage it. So you can pause there and wait again, and then cross over there. Few things. This design certainly is not as, continuous as the previous. It's not constant cycling. You are making cyclists, stop and start, which some would argue is very unattractive. But if we're talking about cyclist safety, it really is critical within these multi-lane environments for cyclists to know that they actually have the free traffic lanes, that they are able to cross there and there's no oncoming traffic. So even impeding that continuity or that, riding constantly, interrupting that flow, I can certainly justify it in these multi-lane high-speed environments, because the safety aspect is just, it's incredibly important within these areas. So here's how this looks out on ground. You can see cyclists, as I said, it's not really being forced to use that, but it's certainly strongly encouraged to use this off-road path. Could cyclists just enter the carriageway and travel through? Yes, they could. And it's likely some would do that, but it's certainly providing an off-road treatment and crossing at designated points. It's providing that as an option, which I think is very positive. For those that have actually designed these in the past, you may have come across this design figure, which was provided in Austroad's Guide to Road Design Part 4B. It's actually been superseded. So this is no longer part of Austroad's guides. They've deleted this from their guidelines. What this was saying is, yep, you're okay just to provide green paint across the legs, all of the legs. And what that does is, okay, I as a cyclist, I'm just going to keep traveling around and not really taking to consideration oncoming vehicles and if they're going to give way to me. So this one has deliberately been superseded, so you won't see this one anymore. Instead, what's being recommended is, well, let's think about our carriageway. Let's think about our crossing points. Who are we going to give priority and how are we going to manage that conflict point? I think this is a really excellent example, similar to the ones that we've been looking at. So if we just have a look at our east-west or this direction here, we have a look at that carriageway. It's dual carriageway, so it's divided. There's multiple lanes. So already I'm thinking this is probably a pretty important road. Like this would be a highway, an arterial road. It's going to have high volumes of traffic, likely high speed as well. That's the first thing that I'm thinking of within this particular design. For our north-south legs, we can see we've got single lane. And let's just assume that these are lower traffic volumes, maybe just providing access for residents, local roads, something like that. The way that this design has treated the cyclist crossing treatments is dependent on that road use, road classification, road purpose. So east-west, as I said, that's an important road. It's a highway, let's just say. Really important that we get general traffic traveling through them and limiting their impact on traffic flows. So let's have a look what happens to the cyclists at these crossing points. It says we've got to install grab rails or hold rails for cyclists. So we're not giving them priority. We're saying you need to slow down as a cyclist and you need to pick a safe time to cross over. And that's been applied at all of those crossings for that major thoroughfare. For our minor thoroughfare, so this is the lower order road, let's just say a local road, we're saying, you know what, cyclists, you can actually have priority across here because we understand that your route is also east-west, so your route is also in that direction. It's important that you get from left to right of screen as quickly and as least cumbersome as possible. So we're going to give you priority across the local road. Really, really intelligent, this particular design. And the way that that is being managed is we've got giveways and we've got a raised crossing for both the northern and southern legs. So we're forcing motorists to slow down and we're assigning the priority to vulnerable road users, our cyclists and our pets. Really awesome example there. Ken.
Well, yeah, and Michael had sort of seen that in the past one with that single lane crossing gives you that sort of ability to do a bit more of that. And Alex is very excited by the fact that the designer here has used mammal as a formalized term in the design. Little prize for somebody who tells me what mammal stands for, the first one to say that. But I'm just trying to think who the designer on this was. This is Reese, was it? Yeah.
Yes, I think that was Reese's humour, and it managed to find its way into this.
Middle-aged male in lycra, little-aged man in lycra. There it comes in. Yes. And I have to put my hand up to say that I categorize myself as mammal for a portion of the time when I'm out getting a bit of exercise riding in, and I still wear a bit of lycra on the commute. Thank you.
Fair, I've seen you wear the lycra just at the pub as well, though, Ken.
Yeah, well, that's it.
We'll hop into our local roundabouts now, and another opportunity for everyone to get involved. I'll ask our favourite question: what's wrong with this photo? Another confused cyclist. That one, some of you actually may recognise as my partner. We'll hop her away. And anyone want to have a guess what's wrong with this photo?
You're going to give it a prize out if they can tell us where this photo is too?
Yeah, why not? If you can guess exactly where this is, it's quite a unique roundabout, I suppose.
Yeah, when you showed me the photo the first time, I'm like, I've stayed in that building directly across from it. I was like, oh. Anyway, we are seeing here, I've got to give my mammal prize out there. Michael's in first on that. Zip merge. Standing in the middle of the road, Mary was. That's a good point there. No drop curves. Sarah's missing. Toby's in the right state with Hobart. Well played. I think prize for at least seeing something that picked the state. Sorry for shouting. I love it. Okay, lots of thoughts coming in there.
Yeah, so the zip merge is an interesting one. That's probably the one that I was going for, but basically just ending the bicycle lane and not providing any treatment at all at the roundabout or leading up to the roundabout. Not ideal, as you can imagine. You certainly want to provide that connectivity and that safety, not just ending it. And it's just the same story as the intersections as well. what has previously been done. I've just been, that's too difficult to deal with. I'm just going to end it, and then good luck. So yeah, good pickup. If cyclists could, mount the curb there and then access that footpath. It's also legal in Tassie to ride on the footpath, for those that didn't know that. So that could have been an option in this site, but instead it's just been an end. And the site is in Launceston, for those curious. And the reason this is somewhat of an interesting site, the roundabout is actually in the shape of a peanut. It looks kind of like this from an aerial view. I think there's 5 legs, 5 or 6. I think it's 5. It's Alphen Road in Launceston, if you want to Google that later. Anyway, just looking at the time, I've got a bit more to cover, and I also want to get through the assignment. So I might just get stuck into these last few slides here.
Put the foot down. Let's go.
So for local roundabouts, this is really where sharrows are appropriate. We're talking low speeds here. We're talking local traffic, so we're not expecting high volumes of traffic or heavy vehicles. So providing sharrows, once again, the sharrow is indicating that this is a shared environment now. It's no longer just a general traffic lane. Cyclists can ride right in the middle of that lane because it's now shared. Providing them is a really good solution. What I like to see also is a bit more advanced, warning that cyclists are coming into that lane, but I've got an example of that coming up, so I'll just hop into that. This one is nearly what I'm after within a sharrow environment or approaching a roundabout, because we are actually, once again, providing local area traffic management treatment, in this case, a speed hump or a speed cushion, to slow down vehicles. In an ideal world, what would happen is you would move this feature before cyclists merge in. So you would have motorists slow down and then cyclists merge in. So this one is the other way around, but it's still got the right ideas. And even because that feature is there, they're already going to be slowing down. So there's certainly safety benefits having it there. I'm not discounting that, but best practice would have shown we'll put the speed hump before that merge point, before the conflict. So once again, if there were a collision, speeds will be low. And if it's at that 20 km/h mark, it's likely that cyclists would be, able to walk away from that. Another example of just this local area traffic management. So these speed humps, this one's actually been carried across the entire carriageway. So entrance and exit to that roundabout. Same design philosophy that I'd recommend though with this one. If this had been brought before that merge point, that would have been a better outcome. But anyway, just wanted to reiterate, local environments, sharrows, sharing the road is a really good solution. Low speeds, also just helps cyclists stand out. They're no longer just pushed to the curb and you have to stay over there. Let them ride in the middle of the road, let them ride in the middle of the roundabout so that their visibility is most prominent and they're a primary user within that space. Just got a few ads that I like to share with the group, just some things that have caught my eye over the years about cycling safety messaging. So this one was a really good one that I thought in California that they did several years ago now, but just trying to communicate to motorists just how vulnerable cyclists are. Pretty, just sort of pretty good ads. Another one that you may have seen trending on Twitter a few years ago is this Red Cup project where cyclists went out and they put red cups on the edge of their bicycle lane. And then they went back there a few hours later and see how long it took before motorists collided with them and crushed them. Another awesome example of just showing how vulnerable cyclists are within the within these on-road bicycle lanes, because there's no guarantee that motorists will actually stay within their traffic lanes. Others also use things like tomatoes and apples just to show that more graphically, I suppose. But yeah, that was a trending kind of hashtag that was going viral. We had red cup projects in Australia, in New Zealand, in Singapore, in Scotland. So it kind of went all around the globe. Just a good way to raise that awareness of the vulnerability. This one's more of a, I just like to share this as an example, but this was in New York. Some fellow got fed up with writing to his council and wanting to see protected bicycle lanes installed on his commute to work. So he went to the hardware store and just picked up 50 plungers and just glued them onto the road and built his own pretty good protected bicycle lane. So credit to the fellow. It didn't unfortunately last. The council did rip them out. And as far as I'm aware, they haven't built a protected bicycle lane. So it still just is an on-road bike lane. But credit to the ingenuity of trying to solve a problem yourself. It's a shame it didn't work, but if you do get time over lunch today and you just want to watch a little ad, just thought I'd share this video as well. So this was an actual advertisement that was running in Scotland. I used to live in Scotland for a couple of years, and I remember this being advertised. See cyclists think horse. So good opportunity to work out exactly what that cryptic message is saying. Have a view. But this one unfortunately got pulled only after a couple of months. Couple reasons. People complained a lot that this lady was not wearing a helmet, and it is not a legal requirement within the UK to wear a helmet. So perhaps that's just a bit of bike anger. But that was a lot of the community bugbear. And also people found it very upsetting that she wasn't riding closer to the curb and channel there, even though it's a cobblestone feature, which I'm sure no one wants to ride over, but people got very upset by that and demanded to see this get scrapped, and that's what happened. So didn't last too long, but still it's a nice ad. So if you got time this afternoon, I'd recommend flicking through that one. We do have one more 360-degree footage video for you to watch. This one is about protected roundabouts that we've been discussing today. So you'll get to ride through the Melbourne protected roundabout. You'll also get to ride through not a protected roundabout, a more traditional, conventional approach to designing these features. And there's also a third example. So please do stay on to the end. It's a slightly longer video, but a really good example of a bi-directional facility, and an example that's not within a metropolitan area either. So it's not just, the big cities that are getting this level of infrastructure, but regional towns as well are starting to see these design features being implemented, which I think is just really wonderful. I was going to hop through the assignment now. Ken, did you want to bring anything up while I've got the slides up? Or
I was just going to say, you've only got 5 minutes to go, and Simon, and I already promised that you might give out a bit of a library of 360-degree footage as well. Sorry to steal your thunder there, revealing.
No, that's fine. That's all good. So yeah, maybe I'll start with that. In our LMS, just uploaded this morning, so it's fresh out of the oven. Under reference documents and resources, there is a cycling 360-degree footage examples PDF, and I've got that document open, so I'll just share my screen.
Yeah.
And what we have here is we've got a list of different cycling infrastructure treatments that we've discussed over the last couple of weeks. We've provided them within the 360-degree footage format that you've already been using, but say down the track you're interested in installing a protected bi-directional bicycle lane and you can't quite remember what that looks like. You can use this as a document, as a library or a resource where you can just click on this link and it'll open up a 360-degree footage of what a bi-directional protected bicycle lane looks like, how it interacts with the intersection here, and you can zoom around. And basically we want to just share this, all this footage that we've collated with you. So you're welcome to use this on your projects. And if you've got other examples that perhaps have not been captured in this document, chances are we've probably cycled through there and we might have that one as well. So we've also just added this little legend, which is emojis, just to show, you know, our opinion of the infrastructure. So what's considered best practice, and there's this screaming person saying, please no. And the please no is this multi-lane roundabout in the city. And it's shocking. If you watch any of them, watch that one if you want to have nightmares, I suppose. But that's definitely what not to do, that example. But yes, that's saved in the resources. So please do keep a copy of that. It might come in handy.
Yeah, feel free to share it with others if they're thinking about different facilities and want to weigh things up. But you've got an assignment to do. So Max, tell them how they're going to do that.
That's right. So module 4 assignment is saved on the LMS, just one Word document here. And I've already got this one open as well. So what we're actually going to get you to do, we're actually going to get you to investigate a site which has cycling infrastructure treatment. So pick something near your house, near your works, somewhere you go to the shop, something that's convenient for you. You don't need to be traveling to do this assignment. But we actually want you to visit it. We want you to go out there. You don't have to ride it if you don't have a bike or anything, but go out, take some photos of the site. And we've got some questions below which we would like you to answer. So select a site that has existing cycling facilities, visit the site, answer the questions listed below. The format which you answer them is completely up to you. If you want to answer this in this Word document and just put a few sentences together and some photos, that's fine. If you want to make a PowerPoint, if you want to do a concept design, if you want to do a video, that's also fine. In the past, we've had people do comic strips, we've had podcasts, we've had poems, we've had, you know, whole families get involved, little toddlers and children and things like that. So it's an opportunity to get creative if you want to. Some people love to have that as an output, you know, just to try something new, but it's not a prerequisite. It's if you want to answer in Word, that's also fine. Once you've answered the question, just save the document or whatever material and publish it on the LMS and you'll get a grade. But the questions are pretty straightforward. What infrastructure currently exists? You'll be marked on using the correct terminology and the correct jargon. So make sure you've revisited the previous modules so you're using those correct terms. What are the hazards for cyclists? What could be installed to better improve safety for cyclists? 3 pretty high level questions, but we want to make sure that you've got the right ideas. You understand what's out there. This is what it's called. This is what we could do instead. And, you know, here's the hazards for cyclists currently. I was also going to mention one more thing. Yes, in order to get your certificate, right down at the bottom of the LMS, there is a cycling infrastructure course feedback form, and that does need to be completed in order to get your certificate. And the reason for that is, you know, we really want to make this as engaging and as useful for our participants as possible. So if you have any advice or any guidance that we may have missed or you're still unclear about, we'd love to hear that. So in order to get your certificate, you do need to complete all that coursework we've mentioned. You do need to do that feedback. Once all that's done, we'll get a message to say all your coursework has been completed, and we'll be able to send you off your certificate and any prizes you may have won. Ken, anything I missed?
You can download an electronic copy of your certificate after you've completed all that. And yeah, as Max said, you'll get in the post physical hard copy plus any prizes you've won along the way. And I want to thank Max for all his work there and his passion associated with this. Please keep in contact with us and feel free to put your certificate online and tell others that you did it. Yeah, we look forward to seeing your assignments and we've just ticked over time. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for taking time to do this course. Hope you got something out of it. Finish off your last assignments and keep in contact.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Happy cycling. Stay safe. Cheers, Ken.
Bye.
Bye.